the park was bustling with life. Old couples went on walks and reaffirmed their love. Young lovers picnicked amongst the trees and whispered sweet nothings. Children walked dogs and played on swing sets. A young man walked amongst them, but he wasn't enjoying the scenery, weather, or atmosphere. He didn't even see these things. It could have been raining and it wouldn't have fazed him. He sat down on the bench and set the notebook in front of him. He began writing amongst the pleasant scenery. I have no clue how to open this. Do I introduce myself? I mean, I'm the only one that's going to read this. The therapist that suggested I use this journal as some form of catharsis is sure as hell not going to read it. He was more than happy to shove me out the door. He was only getting paid for 1 month of therapy by dear old Uncle Sam. The recruiter that enlisted me talked so much about all the great benefits and how they'd take care of me when I got back after 2 tours. 2 tours would have turned into 3 had I not had a complete mental breakdown and was deemed unfit for the job. I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Joseph Yassarian. My rank is First Lieutenant in the Bomber Squad of the Air Force, and I was born on July 9th, 1985. Some old habits die hard, I guess. I'm writing this in a busy park. There are lovers having picnics, old men feeding birds from park benches, kids playing in the playground. Shit. All that's missing is a dog catching a frisbee midair, and we have a Norman Rockwell painting. I had hoped that a change of scenery from my dusty, dreary apartment would lift my spirits some, but it only seems to make me feel worse. Being surrounded by all these happy people without a clue only makes me angry. They don't know. They've never been scared shitless that the next breath they take could possibly be their last. Screw them. I don't really mean that, but I kind of do. If you can understand that. It isn't their fault that I feel this way. But the fact that they don't even care enough to ask me how I'm doing just pisses me off. People walk around me on eggshells like I'm a bouncing Betty just waiting to go off and blow everyone and everything around me to shit. As you can probably tell, my therapy sessions went swimmingly. I ended my tour 6 months back. There was no sending-off party. I got on the plane, and I felt the resentful stare of Snowden burning into my back. I got off the plane to see my family holding signs of my girlfriend, Vera, waiting for me. They ran into my arms, and for that one ephemeral moment, I forgot that I had spent the past half an hour crying to myself in the bathroom. I held it all together so nicely for the first few weeks. I moved in with my girl and we were happy. I joked, laughed, told stories, only the pleasant ones, the rest I kept to myself. And yeah, we were like rabbits. Every corner of the apartment, every piece of furniture, every inch of the apartment. She was the river of Leith, and I kept trying to plunge back in. It all started unraveling when she asked me a question while we were having breakfast. She offhandedly mentioned that I had been talking in my sleep the night before, and mentioned something about an old man looking for something. She was interested in knowing what he was looking for. I didn't answer that question. I never answered her question. Not even when she told me that I had to open up or she would leave me. We went later to a movie, and that's when it started. It wasn't the movie as far as I know. It was about a Dracula owning some sort of a hotel for monsters. It was a kids' movie, and there was literally nothing sad happening at that moment. It was during the closing song, an auto-tuned popish hip-hop conclusion, that it started. The CGI characters were hitting their final note, and their mouths were agape and cast towards the heavens, and I couldn't stop it. I started crying, loudly. My girlfriend pulled me out of the theater with my choked sobs and sniffling disrupting the other patrons. She tried to get me to talk about it, and I told her I was fine. That was the truth I wanted desperately to believe. My veneer of self-deception and lies was starting to crack. We went home later and made love in the shower. Through the cascading water, she couldn't see that I was crying again. We tried to hold all the pieces together, but the rift between us was growing. She kept reaching out to me and I kept tearing away. She'd catch me crying while we laid in bed, trying to sleep, and would ask what was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Everything was wrong. I had just finished up my free month with the shrink, and he told me that I would be fine. So I lied and told myself I was fine. I lied and told her I was fine. It was when the dream started that everything broke down. I dreamt of the old man running down the street looking for something. He was panicked. I didn't need to see his face to know how terrified he was. His face bled through the way he scrambled and frantically moved through the street. As I swooped down on him, dropping my payload from my carpet bombing, I wondered if he was looking for an RPG to shoot down my plane. It didn't matter. I cremated him with the incendiary bombs. As he was swallowed up in the flames, I awoke with a start. I slipped out, trying not to wake Vera, onto the balcony and cried. I was trying my best to keep quiet, but she heard me. Vera came out and we fought. She said that I wasn't the person she knew. She shouted at me to tell her what was happening, what had happened. But I kept quiet. She told me that I couldn't keep pushing her away. I didn't respond. She snapped that we couldn't work this out, so I was silent. She left the apartment and didn't return. A few weeks ago, I heard through the grapevine that she was dating someone. Vera returned to the apartment to collect her stuff while I was out working at the VFW. She couldn't even bear to see me. Maybe it was too painful, or maybe she just wanted a clean break. It didn't really matter, as other issues distracted me when I came home that night. The apartment was half emptied and felt lonely. Well, lonely wasn't the word, as I wasn't in complete solitude. It was there with me. He stood in the center of the room. He was wreathed in the ashes of what were once his clothes. His flesh had turned obsidian from where the firebombs had swallowed him whole. His eyes had boiled in his head, and I imagined that the slightest movement would cause him to crumble and be reduced to ashes. He stood there regarding me. We both stood there for a few moments. He never moved, and I never blinked. I walked through him and went into the kitchen. He appeared by the refrigerator, silently stalking me. Looking at him robbed me of my appetite. I went into the bedroom and collapsed on the bed. When I woke up, he was still there. I called Snowden a few weeks ago when the dream stopped and I started seeing him. I bought an international calling card and gave him a call. We talked for a little. He was doing well. He had been promoted and was still running the same bombing routes he had when I was there. He asked how I was doing, and I evaded the question. We reminisced a little about life overseas, and he asked again if I was all right. I told him I was fine. I hung up the phone and looked at the burnt man who stood in the frame of my doorway. I knew what or who was coming next, and that thought horrified me. I need to explain this while I still have the guts. It was a few months into my service. I had been given coordinates and orders to carpet bomb the area. They had intel that the area was training insurgents and had a stockpile of weapons. Apparently, this was some rite of passage amongst the airmen. Upon running your first solo bombing mission, you would return to base for a night of free drinks and celebratory claps on the back of joining the fraternity of airmen. I went on my mission, excited to return. I still remember the feeling of shrieking through the skies carrying death. The sound of my jet bearing down on the rural community must have sounded like the zipper of God's fly being unzipped. Kurt Vonnegut at his finest. I swooped in low, in a fiendish moment of bravado. I wanted to see the destruction I would visit upon them. I got what I wanted. I saw him when I first triggered the payload to drop. He stumbled around on the street, desperately looking for something. I thought he was trying to reach the weapon stash so he could shoot me down. I continued to firebomb the street, and knew that he would be swallowed up in hellfire like the sword of Damocles dropping on him from above. A few seconds later, I saw what he was looking for. He stood in the middle of the street. I couldn't see him clearly, but in my memories and dreams he is as clear as day. I imagined him looking up into the sky as I tore past him in awe and horror with his mouth agape and his eyes wide. He was watching me as I bore down on him. He was in the incendiary's area of effect. It was too late to pull away. The firebombs had already been deployed. He was as good as dead. He tried to shield himself from it, but it enveloped him like a mother's embrace. I could have sworn I heard him scream. But that wasn't true. The screaming had come from me. The old man was looking for the boy. His son? He was trying to get him help to safety. I incinerated them both. I'd love to say that as soon as that happened, I returned to base, resigned, and faced my court-martial. I didn't. I completely destroyed the incendiary payloads on my targets, and then I returned back to base for the drink. A few days after that, I flew a different route and did the exact same thing. I didn't see any more children in the streets, but who knows if they were there or not. I have something bumbling around in my brain like a moth trapped in a lampshade. The same verse keeps repeating. I was once religious, and one quote from the Bible drew my eye when I used to read it. Matthew 23:27. You are like whitewashed sepulchres, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones. On the outside, I'm an airman, and inside, I'm a monster. I'm dead inside. I'm full of unclean things. I am full of rage directed at myself and those around me. I thought if I could only get away from there, get back here, that I could try to piece together what remains of my conscience. I could find some sort of balm that would heal my mental scars and give me the strength to forgive myself. That isn't going to happen. I thought I could forget, but I know it's too late. I see him everywhere I go. He's with me the instant I wake up in the morning, and he's there when my head hits the pillow at night. He isn't a ghost. The only type of ghost that exists in the memory of what we have done and what we have failed to do. I'm afraid to go back to my apartment. I know what's waiting for me there. It's the old man, but more importantly, it's the boy. Almost burnt beyond recognition. I know that the sight of that boy will shatter the mental barriers I have built to mask my trauma from the world. I know what will happen once the mental mask is eroded, and that terrifies me. I've been carrying the guilt for the death of those two for months. I carry them with me as I try to mask my instability from the world. I carry them as I try to bury my pent-up anger deep down inside of me. I carry them despite the fact that I am ready to explode like a bouncing Betty and shred all those around me to shit. I can't carry them much longer. It's too heavy. Joseph Yossarian closed the journal and stood up from the park bench. Dusk had fallen and the park was almost completely empty, save for one boy playing with a toy jet. He swung it and swooped it around in the sky while pantomiming explosions with his free hand. Yossarian could almost hear what the boy would say if he told him that he was in the Air Force. "I want to be like you." Yossarian hoped from the bottom of his heart that the boy would never know what it was like. Joseph walked back to the apartment as the light rapidly faded. By the time he reached his building, it was dark. Yossarian opened the door and the brief illumination revealed two figures in the room, standing in front of a rifle laying on the coffee table that was waiting to be assembled and put to use. Yossarian wasn't sure if he planned to use it on himself or others. The last of his resolve crumbled away like cinders and left an ashy taste in his mouth. The old man was almost completely ashes, while the boy had severe burns over most of his body. One of his eyes had burst and was dribbling down his cheek. His eyes were cast out towards the ceiling, and his mouth was open like the maw of a monster preparing to swallow his sanity whole. He didn't bother to turn on the lights. Yossarian stepped into the apartment that was filled with darkness in every sense of the word and shut the door.